You're traveling through another podcast. A podcast not only of reviewing and discussing, but of discovery. A journey into a wondrous show whose boundaries are that of imagination. That's the RSS feed up ahead. Your next stop, Anthology.
Hello and welcome to Anthology, presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. I'm your host, Matt Hurt, and if this is your first time listening, Anthology is my journey through the Twilight Zone as a first-time viewer. Each podcast, I review one episode of Rod Serling's iconic series and round out the show with a bonus review of a movie or show related to the week's main topic. I also cover modern anthology science fiction shows such as Black Mirror and Dimension 404 in bonus episode review series. You can find more of Anthology as well as a full episode archive at anthologypod.com. And if you want to contact me, you can use the Facebook page at facebook.com/anthologypod, tweet me at OVAnthologypod, or send an email to matt@obsessiveviewer.com. Today on the show, I'll be discussing Back There, which is the 13th episode of Twilight Zone's second season, and it aired on January 13th, 1961. And for this week's bonus review, I'll share my thoughts on the 1960 adaptation of H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. And as usual, before I begin my talent rundown and review of the episode, I'm going to read a plot description courtesy of Martin Grams Jr.'s Twilight Zone: Unlocking the Door to a Television Classic. And of course, this is going to be completely spoiler filled. So from here on out, I'm going to be spoiling the entirety of the episode Back There. So consider yourself warned. Late one evening, Peter Corrigan discusses the subject of time travel with other members of a private club. One member claims he could alter the course of past events and then profit from his knowledge of the past. Corrigan, however, disagrees with them, believing that if he went back in time, he could only participate in what has already happened. The present day will never be altered. As he exits the building, however, he finds himself transported back to 1865, the very evening President Lincoln will be assassinated. When Corrigan tries to warn people of the oncoming assassination, the police arrest him for being drunk and disorderly. A doctor named Wellington arranges for Corrigan's release in the hopes of curing the young man of a case of dementia. In Wellington's hotel room, Corrigan's efforts to convince the doctor that the president will be assassinated fails when he discovers he's been drugged. Waking from the effects of the drug, Corrigan learns he is too late. News shouts through the streets of the president's death, and Corrigan discovers Wellington's real name is John Wilkes Booth. Returning to the present, Corrigan discovers a few minor changes. The answer to the question of whether time travel would alter the events of the past is answered. While a man can alter the events on a small scale in his return to the past, the changes will only be noticeable to the time traveler. So starring in this episode is Russell Johnson as Pete Corrigan. This is his second and final Twilight Zone appearance, and those two Twilight Zone episodes are his only collaborations with Rod Serling. He was previously in Execution, which I had the pleasure of reviewing with Brandon Cruz as a guest on his podcast, submitted for your approval. And let's see, Russell Johnson was also in one episode of The Outer Limits in 1964, titled Specimen Unknown. And, of course, he's most well known for playing the professor on Gilligan's Island. And as Jonathan Wellington is John Lassell. This is his only episode of The Twilight Zone. He did appear in an episode of Night Gallery in the segment Little Girl Lost, which, as far as I can tell, is not related to the Twilight Zone episode that I think that I think there's an episode of the Twilight Zone titled Little Girl Lost, but I don't think it's related to the Night Gallery segment. I could be wrong. If I am, feel free to correct me. And then John Lassell also appeared in one episode of One Step Beyond, which was titled Tonight at 12:17. And Rod Serling wrote the script for this episode, and according to Martin Grams Jr. in Unlocking the Door to a Television Classic, this episode was originally conceived as an hour-long story and was actually shopped around to different productions. And he shopped it to Armstrong Circle Theater, which was the only hour-long anthology show that was airing at the time, but they weren't interested in the script, and sponsors for the Twilight Zone didn't want to expand the show to an hour-long episode, so Serling ended up shortening the script to 23 minutes. I'm curious what kind of changes were made what the full script was like, but I don't have access to that. Director for this episode was David Orrick McDearman. This is his final of 3 Twilight Zone episodes. He previously directed Execution and A Thing About Machines. So going into this episode as a first-time viewer, I didn't know anything about it. I just knew that it had something to do with time travel, and that it starred the professor from Execution, or the doctor. I think he was a doctor in Execution. He was a professor on Gilligan's Island. But anyway, the title itself back there, it made me think that it was going to be kind of a nostalgia story, kind of like Walking Distance. Like I kind of imagined a wistful feeling of wanting to go back there to a simpler time. And I was pretty wrong on that, but that's neither here nor there. So going into the episode, I thought that it was really quick to establish like exactly what Corrigan and his friends are. They're kind of upper class academic types, and I feel like the set of the Potomac Club it clearly shows like exactly what type of people these people are, and what their class is, I guess. They're clearly like high class intellectual types. So I thought that was just a really easy way to, not easy way, but a very clean way to introduce us to the characters. And then we meet Corrigan, and right into it, we're into a discussion of time travel paradoxes, and right at that point, I'm already on board with this episode. So I adore time travel stories. I love time travel stories. One of my favorite movies is Back to the Future, and I mean I have just so many movies that I love because of time travel aspects to them. So throughout this review, I'm probably going to be talking a little more to that, but Corrigan's theory, so in their discussion, they're talking about how they can change the past if they go back to the date that the stock market crashed. They could change it or use it to their advantage and everything. But Corrigan's theory is that the date of the stock market crash is a fixed date in history, and that it will always remain that. And that's kind of a concept that they've used in Doctor Who, like the idea of like fixed dates in history. And just as a tangent, my first tangent of this episode is that I love this idea of certain historical events becoming somewhat like chapters or bookmarks in time. Like, one of the things that's most appealing about time travel as a narrative concept to me is that it's essentially editing. Like, there's such a strong desire in most people to want to make things right, or to go back and change. Like, they want to make things perfect. And time travel makes the viewer or character perceive time as a narrative. And then the time traveler actually becomes the editor of that narrative. So it's the idea of time travel as a concept and time travel as a narrative device is very much kind of a creative idea. Because the time travel, like I said, becomes the editor of the narrative. And there's something to be said about God complexes and time travel characters, obviously, as well. Just that, obviously it takes a lot for a time traveler to think, oh, I'm going to be the sole person to correct something that time has given us, essentially. Time travelers view the timeline and the narrative as imperfect and fixable. So they take it upon themselves to correct God or the universe and their imperfections that they've done. So I don't know if I'm communicating that clearly, but the ego that's required for a time travel character to think that they know what's best for the universe is something that I find really fascinating from a character perspective. And that's one of the reasons why I love time travel stories. And so, anyway, to go back to this episode, it reminded me a little bit of The Time Element, Rod Serling's first Twilight Zone script, essentially, that aired before the Twilight Zone was picked up and everything. I reviewed it with Tiny in a previous episode of this podcast, but had I not already reviewed it with Tiny, it really would have made a great bonus review for this episode. So the reason why I picked the time machine as the bonus review is that there's a reference to H.G. Wells as Corgan gets up to leave, and I was kind of tickled by that. I thought that was kind of cute, I guess. And what I really like about this, like I'll get to the actual time travel and my reaction to it, but what I like about this scene where he gets up to leave and he's about to time travel without knowing it. What I like about that is that the script isn't on the nose or sloppily written or anything. Like, it could have been so easy for them to have the characters sit down, talk about preventing the stock market crash or changing it or what have you, and then Corgan gets up and, he's going to be time traveling back to 1920 or 1939. When the stock market crashed, like that's when he's going to go. But the episode just subverts that expectation by taking him to a completely different time and different event and everything. And I love that the conversation that was had was solely to ease the audience into the concept and into the characters and their viewpoints of it. And it's just such a relief that this episode doesn't hold our hand by having Corgan magically travel back to the era that they were just discussing. I feel like when you have a time travel story in a narrative, it is so, like, okay, I've explained that I love time travel stories, but it's not for everyone. Not everyone loves time travel. And when you're creating a show or a movie that is meant to appeal to as wide an audience as you can, it's so easy for, interference from like the studio side of it to have the narrative be as plain and straightforward as possible. In this episode, it's just nice that we don't have that kind of hand-holding for the audience. I really respect this episode for that. And just the way that Corgan gets up to leave and he says, "Since no one has gone back in time, I find it too theoretical," the conversation. I don't know. I think time travel is such a fun conceit for a narrative. And so when Corgan leaves, he does like a double take to someone that he passes by. That kind of left me a little confused. I guess it was kind of needed for him to bump into William, the butler guy or the server. But it just kind of felt like kind of strange to me. Cause I thought that was going to come into play later. Like he had seen, like they could have gone deeper into like time travel stories and have it be like he's doing a double take because he just saw himself at a different time. But I mean, that's not what the story was really going for or anything. So, but at the time when I first saw it, in my first initial reaction to Corgan doing the double take, I kind of thought like, is this going to get a little more, is this going to be like there are a few different types of time travel stories. Like there's the intellectual one that's like this episode where it's, going back in time to change events and everything. And then there's the kind like the movie Primer or Time Crimes that it plays with the convention of time travel by making a very, very intricately woven storyline that has, overlapping timelines going throughout it. So I kind of wondered if maybe this would be like a Time Crimes or Primer type of story. And so that threw me off a little bit when I first saw it, when he did the double take. So when he steps outside, he actually had like the time travel device. I really like the way that this is depicted. So it's very simplistic and straightforward. The camera just kind of comes out of focus when Corgan steps outside, and that's indicating that he's traveled through time. Very straightforward. I love that there's no explanation. There's no reason for it. It just happens, and that's perfect because when you get into a deeper when you get into explaining the time travel, the story just can fall by the wayside, and you can go down a rabbit hole of explaining the time travel. And then time travel is such an out there concept for narratives that you'll have people that watch it and then they pick apart the explanation. So it's better to just not have an explanation. And that's what I love about it. Like, that's something that I really loved about this episode, is that they don't explain the time travel. They just put us in the time travel. And so the actual camera changing, or camera coming out of focus and everything, like, that's enough in its own way to that's an effective enough device to show us that he traveled through time. But then they show the lantern. It changes from a lamp to a lantern, and I thought that, like, even though we already had the camera going in and out of focus, and that would have been perfectly fine and minimalistic, showing the lamp changing into the lantern is just a very nice touch and a very nice, like, kind of flourish to the video, or to the visual cues of showing us that he's traveled through time. I really appreciated that. And then immediately when he's back in 1865, I just noticed that the music is drastically different than from what we usually get in the episode. And it's very unexpected, but I really liked it, and I thought that it was a very ominous type of musical number, and I really liked it. And so on a meta level, I really liked where we were going with this episode, because the actor Russell Johnson, he is now, in this moment, he is now basically in the exact opposite role of his character in Execution. So in Execution, he brought a character from the past into the future, and that character had spent the rest of the episode, like, acclimating to the present day and freaking out over it and everything. So now there's a reversal, where now this actor is portraying a character that is similar to the character that he was playing off of in Execution. So now he is the one who has traveled through time and has to react to it. And I thought that was, I just like that on a meta level throughout the, like, history of the Twilight Zone. I kind of like that kind of interchange there, I guess. And so he's kind of wandering through the town, and I believe he goes to his apartment. And I like that I guess it's a border house. The woman in charge, I love the way that her mood just completely changes when he says that he's an engineer. So, like, I like that, because it's like, he's just a guy off the street, and then she's asking if he's in the war and everything, and then he just mentions, I'm an engineer, and she's like, oh, okay, well, here's your room and everything. I kind of like that. So at this point, we get characters that are in the house that are kind of referencing that they're going to a play. And at this point, I had no idea where we were going with this. I'll admit my ignorance. Even though the set design and everything was clearly 1865, I kind of thought for a second, like, okay, did he actually go back to I think it was 1939 when the stock market crashed. But anyway, did he go back to then, or, like, where is he in time? And then as soon as they referenced the president, it just clicked with me that, oh my God, this is a Lincoln assassination plot. And I was floored by that. I thought that was such a cool surprise. And it shows my ignorance so much that I didn't see it coming, because even the date, like, they reference the date, that he was coming from is April 14th, 1961, and obviously April 14th, 1865 is when Lincoln was assassinated. So you would think that plus the clearly 19th century set design would have signaled that to me, but I don't know. My first viewing, it didn't even register with me. And so I was so excited about that, because, I don't know. I think part of that was because I had watched, I think it was Profile in Silver from the 80s Twilight Zone, and, like, that is about a character who goes back in time and with the Kennedy assassination, and just, I don't know. I wasn't expecting the original Twilight Zone to tackle the Lincoln assassination, so I was very excited about that. And so at this point, to kind of break off into another tangent about time travel, there's kind of something that can be said about time travelers. I have so much trouble saying that word out loud. Time travelers, and their sort of duty to change the past. So Corrigan has been transported magically to 1865. It's 96 years in the past. for no apparent reason. Like, from his perspective and from our perspective as audience members, we have no context for why he was transported back. So other than him and his friends debating the concept of time travel, there's nothing in the opening scenes to make you think there is a purpose for the time travel. And despite this, Corrigan's first instinct, his immediate instinct when he finds out when he is, that's such I didn't mean to do that. That is such a corny thing. Like, the whole trope of like, when are we? But anyway, despite this, Corrigan's first instinct when he finds out when in time he is, his first instinct is to try to save Lincoln. And there's kind of a sort of nobility to that, that there's this man who has barely comprehended the weight of what has just happened to him, and his gut reaction when confronted with the one piece of information that he is absolutely certain about, being the Lincoln assassination, is to fling himself into the quote-unquote narrative of April 14th, 1865 in an attempt to save Lincoln's life. And I don't know, and that's spread across all of time travel fiction, essentially, that it's always assumed that the character traveling through time has this duty or purpose to change the past. And it's this kind of nobility factor to that character that, makes the central character of this type of story, I don't know if I would say relatable. Well, I guess relatable to an extent, because we always, we kind of want to be that person. We want to be that person that changes everything. But yeah, it brings kind of a likability to the character that I appreciate. So you can argue that it's just plot convenience, that, oh, he's in 1865, so he needs to save Lincoln. There's nothing more to that, and that maybe I'm reading into it. But I think that that's something that's subtextually in the time travel story, of like in all of time travel stories like this, that doesn't offer an explanation. It's just they're there. I think that you can read into that and be accurate. And it's also interesting to note that immediately after finding out the date, he is immediately working against his own thesis about fixed points in time. So it's just funny that mere moments ago he was talking about how, it's going to happen anyway. The stock crash is going to happen anyway, so it's not, you can't prevent it. And then he's immediately in a position where he can change the past, and he doesn't even second guess it or anything. I liked that turn, because it's more about the character who's traveled through time basically seeing it as an opportunity, like not even questioning it or bringing in his own rational thought into it. It's just, he's there, he's gonna do it. And so the police don't believe him. So he goes and he reports it and everything, and the police don't actually believe him. And I don't know, or actually the police bring him into the station because he was trying to prevent it, and they don't believe him. And maybe this is 2017 Matt, or I guess it's 2018 now, damn. 2018 Matt viewing it through that lens, but I don't know if I necessarily buy that the police wouldn't believe him. Just because, I mean, you have the president, the president's whereabouts are known. And when I say 2018, Matt, I'm not saying that I don't think it was, believable that they wouldn't capture him, because, I'm gonna walk myself into a corner here, but okay, let me start over. So, the police don't believe him, and I had trouble kind of buying into that. Not from this episode was written in the 60s and people in the 60s would buy into it or anything. I mean that as in, I don't know how much I buy that police in the 1860s wouldn't believe a person saying that the president was going to be assassinated when it's common knowledge where and when the president was going to be. Again, I don't know, because I'm living in a time where, like the Kennedy assassination was obviously a huge thing that affected change in the way that like security detail and president's public appearance, like security increased so much and everything. So I don't know what the kind of police reaction would have been in 1865. So anyway, to that effect, I kind of wish that there would have been, like, I would have liked to have seen a scene where Corrigan tells the police, like, oh yeah, John Wilkes Booth is going to assassinate Lincoln. I kind of would have liked to see that. I kind of would have liked to see a scene where he says that, and then they kind of do like the whole Doc Brown, Marty McFly scene where it's like, oh, John Wilkes Booth, the actor. I kind of would have liked to have seen a scene like that, but I guess having them recognize the name would have made Jonathan Wellington's inclusion in the station a little problematic. And so then obviously we get to Jonathan Wellington's introduction, and it was funny because when I first saw this episode, my initial reaction was, who is that? And I was wondering if he was one of the people that were at the table in the first scene. And I couldn't place him from memory from that first scene. I didn't like pause and go back and check or anything like that. So I kind of wondered, at that point I was wondering, it would be kind of interesting if it was like a character was chasing him through time, kind of like Time After Time. But that's not where the narrative went. But what I kind of laughed to myself about is that when watching it, I made in my notes that the actor playing Jonathan Wellington reminds me of a Shakespeare character. And yeah, so the fact that he is John Wilkes Booth in reality in this episode is just kind of, I like the way that the actor portrayed him, because when he is in the police station, it's clear that he's doing a performance. He's very theatrical and he kind of has a Shakespearean kind of quality to him. And to go back to my thoughts that it could have been another time traveler, I kind of would have been, I don't know if I'd say more interested, but I would have been very interested to see a story where two time travelers arrive in 1865 with very different views as to what to do about the assassination. Like, I would have liked to see two characters kind of arguing, basically having the conversation at the beginning of this episode where they argue whether or not they should attempt, like, kind of tempt fate or tempt the universe by trying to correct the past. And so the police writing off Corrigan as a soldier who left his mind in Gettysburg, that's actually kind of really heartbreaking. It fits historically. Like, I don't think PTSD was even on the radar until after World War II, and even then it was just considered, they just called it shell shock, and they didn't, I think that was World War I. Yeah. It wasn't anything that was treated until, I don't believe it was anything treated until World War II, but it wasn't anything that was in the public conscience until after, like, World War II. And that scene, like, it feels so, that line feels so authentic and everything. And kind of even more heartbreaking that this was written by Serling, who, of course, had his own demons from the war. Then we get the scene with Corrigan and Wellington, and where Wellington poisons him, or drugs him, I should say, and to take him out of the equation so he can assassinate the president. And when I first saw this, I honestly, when Corrigan is shown to be drugged, I kind of thought for a second that it was actually the universe kind of course correcting, which I really enjoy in time travel stories and everything. I mean, it's a very interesting narrative structure. Like Stephen King's 11/22/63 is a really good example of that, because essentially the universe and time trying to preserve itself, it becomes an antagonist in its own. But that's not what we got. So I kind of at that point I was like, I kind of bet that he's actually John Wilkes Booth. So I was kind of proud of myself for catching that. And I really like that basically Wellington's conversation with Corgan after he gets Corgan out of jail can basically be boiled down to John Wilkes Booth interrogating Corgan for information about who else knows about the assassination attempt. And at least that's kind of how I read it, that he's trying to get information so that he can execute his plan and the president. And I really like the writing of that, because it's not, like I said earlier, like this is not an episode that's holding the audience's hand. And I think that that's very admirable, because, I mean, it's all kind of subtext. Like, John Wilkes Booth has plans, and this is the kind of vagueness of the conversation with Corgan works so well in that favor, because it's not revealed to us that he's John Wilkes Booth until later. So it's a kind of conversation that you go back and watch after you've seen this episode, and it just clicks together even more. It's an episode that invites repeat viewings, and it's really well structured. I just really like that as a narrative device to conceal the twist to the audience while also moving the story along. And so then after Corgan's drugged, he kind of crawls across the hotel room to get to the door. And that sequence, that was just a little too long for me. Like, I get that it was supposed to be tense since we saw that the play had already started, but it just goes on just a little too long for my taste. And it's not like it leads to Corgan, like, going to Ford's Theater to prevent it or anything. It's just that it's kind of, he's just crawling to the door. It just, as a time factor, it didn't really do anything for me in terms of suspense. And then kind of the denouement of the episode, I guess, where, he's about to go back into the future and everything. He's yelling that he tried to warn you. I tried to warn you. Why didn't you listen? I thought that was okay. After it was revealed that Wellington was Booth all along. I don't know. I just thought that it didn't really leave an impression on me, I should say. And so when he gets back to the present, it turns out that he did change the past, even though he didn't save Lincoln or anything. Just he changed the past, and that his interactions with the cop at the station led to the waiter becoming a millionaire. And I kind of like the pseudo offense that the character, the millionaire character, takes at the suggestion that he was once an attendant at the club. It's just, it goes back to kind of like the class depiction in this episode. Like, he even pulls rank on Corrigan in a manner of speaking. He says, like, I've been a member of this club for, I forget exactly what he said, but he kind of just says that he's been there for a long time. And yeah, so it just seems, or I just like the kind of offense that he takes at the mere suggestion that he was once an attendant at the club. So I kind of overall, I like the overall message and the story of the episode. I like I said, I'm kind of a sucker for time travel stories. I kind of wish there was a little bit more about John Wilkes Booth in this episode. It just seemed kind of, I don't know, perfunctory, that he's just there just to drug Corrigan, and then that's it. I don't know what else we could have had with him, but I kind of maybe I just like the actor a lot, and I would have liked to see more. But yeah, overall it was a pretty okay episode. I enjoyed it. It was good. I liked it. Probably I wouldn't say middle of the road. It's a little bit above average for me. Quite a bit above average, because it actually did give me a lot to think about in terms of, it made me reflect on why I like time travel stories so much, and that's something that I respect about it. And the way that it's a quality done time travel story that doesn't dumb it down for us, or I don't know if I'd say dumb it down, but it doesn't hold our hands throughout the concept. And that's something that I respect out of science fiction, really. And the only real piece of trivia that I have is that Jerry Goldsmith's score for this episode was reused partially in Nightmare at 20,000 Feet and Death Ship, and that's courtesy of the Twilight Zone companion. yeah, that's pretty much all I've got on that. Yeah, so that'll do it for my review of Back There. I'm going to play a brief clip from one of my other podcasts, and then I'll go into my bonus review of The Time Machine. So enjoy this short clip. It's an interesting juxtaposition because you get this wide angle view of just Colin Farrell and another character walking down a hallway. So it's this kind of like, it does this weird like mental trick with your mind that you're seeing this enclosed space, but it's a wide angle, so you see like everything around it. It's like you see both sides of the hallway. Like there's
sounds like Kubrick a little bit.
And that's yes, and that was my next point.
Okay.
It very much evokes memories of like Kubrick films. Okay, and that clip came from a recent episode of The Obsessive Viewer, which is a weekly movie and TV podcast that I host with my friend Tiny and assorted guests on occasion. You can find more of The Obsessive Viewer on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and at obsessiveviewer.com. You can also find more of my podcasting overall at obsessiveviewer.com/podcasts. And so for my bonus review for this week, I am going to review The Time Machine from 1960. It was directed by George Pal and written by David Duncan, based on, of course, the timeless H.G. Wells novel, The Time Machine, which I should say up front, I've never read The Time Machine. I really want to, but it just hasn't, I haven't gotten around to it at this point. So I don't have the story of the novel as a point of reference. I have seen the 2002 remake, but it's been several years, and to be honest, the movie did not leave an impression on me. So yeah, I might as well be going into this cold. So right from the outset, I kind of wondered how the movie would compare to Time After Time, which I reviewed on a previous bonus review. And I think I enjoyed this movie a little bit, I don't know, probably about the same as Time After Time, maybe a little bit more. There's some really good stuff in it. So, H.G. Wells is the central character played by Rod Taylor, who I really love the way that Rod Taylor carried himself throughout the movie. He's got kind of the strong leading man demeanor, but since he's basically telling a story of him traveling through time, through various points in time, he doesn't have, while he is a strong leading man, he doesn't have that like supporting cast to really play off of. So it's the kind of the narrative and the strength of the movie rests on his shoulders, because he is basically interacting with new sets of characters each time he travels through time. So I just really appreciate and admire the way that Rod Taylor was able to take on that task and carry himself as a leading man. That's the maybe not movie star quality, but like he carried it very well and held my attention. And early on in the movie, when he's explaining time travel, he's kind of showing off a model of the time machine to his friends. There's one line that really stuck out to me that I really loved. It was they're talking about how we as people can navigate through the three dimensions of space and everything, but not the fourth. So he says that when it comes to time, we are prisoners. And I just love that sentiment, because again, I love time travel, and the idea of being able to go back and forward through time is very intriguing to me, both the philosophical level and as a narrative. And so, of course, I can't talk about the Time Machine without talking about the iconic Time Machine design. So it's very, like, again, I don't have the novel as a point of reference, and I just barely have the 2002 remake as an idea of what the Time Machine as a story is. But even though I have a passing familiarity with H.G. Wells' work with it, I still know and admire the design of the Time Machine. And it's so, I mean, you could almost say that it just looks really silly and weird, but it's because it's basically a chair with a spinning disc behind it with levers on kind of a podium type of thing in front of it with a display. And like as simplistic and maybe not simplistic, well, I guess simplistic as that design is, it's still just iconic. It's really interesting. Like I love the design of it as a time machine device. Like it would be almost up there with the DeLorean. Yeah. So one of there are a couple things that really stood out to me about this movie that kind of really left a huge impression on me. So the first is the visual effects. So even in situations where if they're just lighting changes in audio, so I'm talking specifically about the visual effects of the time travel. So like there are scenes where like lights are flashing in front of Rod Taylor and there's audio distortion and everything. Like even as simplistic as that, it's still incredibly effective. But what I love most about it is that the movie shows these time lapses of time moving outside of the time machine as Rod Taylor is traveling through time. And man, every time that this happened, we see like bodies dissolve into skeleton. We see the landscape in front of Rod Taylor change and shift and erode and move around and everything, and structures being built and torn down. Like just the way that that's depicted is so gorgeous. Like I loved it so much. I was really impressed by that. And it made me really excited anytime he got into the time machine. And then another part that I won't go into too heavy of spoilers with it, of course, but there is a destruction sequence in one of the times that he goes to, which first of all, it has a lot to say about, Cold War era stuff. I don't know how much of that was in the book, and I'm not even sure when the book was published. But just the way that there's a city that's destroyed. I'll say that. And just that sequence is so impressive to me. Like there's, the whole set, like they don't cut around it or anything. It's just, they have like these models that are just torn down and destroyed. And then what I also love is that they show, these like kind of volcanic eruptions, and there's lava that's kind of going through the streets. But the thing about it is, like I've seen plenty of like nature documentaries and documentaries about volcanoes and stuff, and like I've always kind of loved the way that, in a kind of somewhat messed up sense, I love the way that the molten lava is depicted because it's just very colorful and everything. But here, we get that kind of molten lava look, but it's like bubbling, and every time like it bubbles up and pops and everything, it looks more like it's like molten blood. Like it has this blood-like consistency to it. That's just that kind of really stuck with me, and I really loved that. And so I'm getting more into spoiler territory, so I'll stay away from spoilers. But a couple things about it is that obviously a big part of the story is the Morlocks, which I won't go into details, but it's just they're the villains of the movie essentially and of the story. But I don't have the novel as a point of reference for me, so I don't know how involved they are in the book or anything, but I just feel like one of the movie's shortcomings was that the Morlocks were kind of introduced way late into the movie, and there's an air of mystery surrounding them. So even though we're introduced to them late in the game, kind of like several moments later is when we kind of get the full extent of what the Morlocks are and what they're doing. And like as a concept, I found that chilling, but I kind of feel like there should have been, I kind of wish that there was more to it. I wish that there was a bigger build up to it, and that the time that he spends in the future was more, took up more time of the movie. Like I would have been happy spending another 20-30 minutes in this movie if it meant developing the Morlocks more and developing the final conflict a lot more. Having said that, the actual design of the Morlocks is really cool. Like the effects of their eyes are really, like the effects of their eyes that they have, like they kind of glow in kind of an evil way. The eyes plus the kind of lighting of the kind of big climax of the movie, and the setting of where it is just, it works so well together that it's kind of chilling and really really effective, even though I kind of wish that the Morlocks were explored a lot more. Yeah, and that, I guess, would be about it. So, kind of my final thought about it is that the movie has this narration, like voiceover narration / kind of framing story, where like the movie starts with H.G. Wells coming back from the future, and he's basically, the entire movie is him telling his friends about what's happened to him. And I wasn't crazy about that, because it kind of felt like the narration was a little bit too heavy-handed. Like, I kind of wish that it was more, I would have much rather taken the narration and even the framing story itself out of the equation and had the movie visually like show me the story, as opposed to have Rod Taylor tell it to me in voiceover. So that was something I really didn't like about it. And yeah, but other than that, I mean, the visual effects were really, really well done, surprisingly well done. And I was kind of really taken with it. And the iconography of the time machine was great. Yeah, so overall, I really liked this movie, and I'm going to have to check out the novel, of course, and I don't know, maybe someday someone will make a really good adaptation of it. Not that this, I'm putting my foot in my mouth. I'm talking about that in relation to the 2002 remake, which wasn't that great. So that will do it for this episode of Anthology. Thank you so much for listening. By the way, I am currently in the midst of my bonus review series on Black Mirror Season 4. The next episode I'm going to be reviewing and it's going to come out in a couple days, is Hang the DJ, which I'm extremely excited about. I have some very cool, I got some very good email feedback from listener Robert, and then I also got this interesting comment on the website that I'm going to go through that called to attention something in my review of Dust. So I was thinking about reading the feedback on this episode, but it goes into a lot of the review I did for Archangel, the second episode of, or I think it was third second episode of Black Mirror Season 4. So I'm going to save that for my review of Hang the DJ. So, go ahead and, make sure you check out those bonus reviews. And of course, if you like what you've heard and you want to help support the show, please leave a rating and review on iTunes. It helps me out a lot. And you can also donate to the podcast through PayPal by clicking the donate button on anthologypod.com. Or you can set up recurring donations through Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. That's always really appreciated, and it will also get you access to exclusive Patreon film commentary tracks that I record in my free time. So right now there's a review of Jingle All the Way. I think the next one I'm going to do is probably I Love You Man, just because it's one of my favorite comedies of it's a favorite comedy of mine, and it's currently on Netflix, so I'll probably record a commentary on that. But so next time on the podcast is episode 47, The Whole Truth, which is episode 14 of the Twilight Zone's second season. And then as my bonus review, I'm going to be reviewing 2009's Mr. Nobody, which was a special Patreon suggested review from Robert, our Patreon subscriber, who is at the $10 level, where I get to review a bonus review that he chooses each month. So I'm very excited for that. Of course, that will be a special Patreon. Since it is a Patreon suggested bonus review, I'm going to have a complete non-spoiler and spoiler review of it. So check out Mr. Nobody. It's on Netflix, and check out my thoughts on it. And next time on Anthology. So having said all that, thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to Anthology, presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. For more of Anthology and a full archive of my episodes, go to anthologypod.com. And if you want to help support the show, the easiest way you can do that is by leaving a rating and a review on iTunes. You can also make donations to the show courtesy of the donate link in the show notes of each episode and on anthologypod.com. For recurring donations, you can become a patron at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer and just choose one of the Anthology reward tiers. If you enjoy Anthology, feel free to check out The Obsessive Viewer, a weekly movie and TV podcast I host with my friend Tiny and occasional guest co-hosts over at obsessiveviewer.com. You can also join the Obsessive Viewer Facebook group at facebook.com/theobsessiveviewer. For book reviews and commentary on the world of reading, check out our sister site at obsessivebooknerd.com. And for philosophical discussions from a secular viewpoint, check out my friends Chad and Amanda at thesecularperspective.com. Finally, if you'd like to contact me with your thoughts on the show, my reviews, my bonus reviews, or for any other reason, you can tweet me at obsessiveviewer, send me an email at matt@obsessiveviewer.com, or send me a message on Facebook and like the Facebook page at facebook.com/anthologypod. Once again, thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.